Hello, welcome. So yeah, this has been a long time coming, and I apologize to the people who subbed to this channel for the kind of content I was making last year, because I am no longer doing that, evidently. Mostly because I didn't think that it would get the traction that it did, and I also kind of disappeared for a year for,
in Canada's fight against COVID-19.
Personal reasons. By all that, I of course mean that I got kind of pissy about something, and I'm gonna make a video about it, like a mature adult. Before I heat up my takes, if you will, have you heard of Sia's movie Music? So, back in 2015, Sia announced this project of hers at the Venice Film Festival. Stop! She would be directing and producing a movie starring Maddie Ziegler. Flash forward a few years, and most people have kind of forgotten that she was doing this thing at all, unless you were following her socials pretty closely, and lo, a trailer drops. On January 15th, after releasing some little crumbs of content for the film here and there, most notably some songs, it's a musical. Get it? Musical? I spilled cider! Shit! I should probably take the label off this, shouldn't I? It's not sponsored, but you could probably tell that by the everything. Where was I? Right. June 15th, a trailer drops and all hell breaks loose. Breaks. How much is in this? Fuck, I dripped more. The film is about a newly clean drug addict having to take care of her autistic non-verbal sister, Music, played by Maddie Ziegler. And here's the thing. Maddie isn't autistic. The people involved in writing and producing the movie are not autistic. Both Sia and the film's co-writer Dallas Clayton are not autistic. Right off the bat, there was a lot of criticism about casting a non-autistic actor as an autistic character, and her response was to ignore them. Now, I do not blame Maddie for this. She was only 14 at the time and reportedly was very anxious on set, had a couple breakdowns, was worried about offending people. She was a minor surrounded by powerful adults. I don't blame her for this. Don't dogpile children. Please. So we've got a film about a thing, and none of the people who are making it have any experience with the thing. Rocky start, but all is not lost. Maybe there can be some good of this. Oh no. Oh god. Oh. I want to give as much grace as I can to Sia because she didn't have any malicious intent with making this, I think. Granted, intent kind of stops mattering when you disregard the voices of hundreds of people going, wait, stop, no, this is a bad call. But still, I don't want to be unfair. So, in the interest of fairness, let's see how Sia responded. Let's see how she reacted to these founded and valid critiques of her misguided film. Surely it can't be that bad. Fucking bullshit. You have no fucking idea because you weren't there and haven't seen the movie. Grrr! Did she just growl? Grrr! Fuckity fuck. Why don't you watch my film before you judge it? Fury! Maybe you're just a bad actor. Duh, I spent 3 fucking years researching. I think that's why I'm so fucking bummed. I've never referred to Music as disabled. Special abilities is what I've always said. Jesus, is she an X-Men? Special abilities. And casting someone at her level of functioning was cruel, not kind. I actually tried working with a beautiful young girl, nonverbal, on the spectrum, and she found it very unpleasant and stressful, so that's why I cast Maddie. Hold on. Who's this person? Can we get a word with them? Were they perhaps made out of whole cloth? Who's to say? So yeah, she got defensive and lashed out before the film even came out, and then when it did come out with no meaningful changes, people were understandably pretty pissed. Personally, I was unable to watch the film because of the restraint scene, and also because the first 5 minutes of it were like unbearably boring, and it seems like a pretty mediocre film aside from all the yikesness of it. But I want to be clear, this isn't a hit piece so much as it is me wondering why. Why did she do this when everyone said to stop? Why did she think it would go over well? Why did it get so much attention? And why wasn't I surprised? Like, when I heard the news of the casting, my reaction was like, yeah, Hollywood is kind of shitty, and I didn't understand the shock. The outcry was something I had never really seen in film before, at least in regards to disability, because this has been happening for decades and no one's been saying anything. Though I'm happy to see the advocacy, I am perplexed. And I don't mean for this to be a drama thing, because I don't care. This one film that was almost universally panned and not many people saw it, matters way less to me than a cultural economy that fostered it. How did we get here? Well, in order to answer that, we're gonna have to go back. Yes, this is the history part of the video. Put on your hats. I've got a hat. I got 2 hats. Disability in film goes back like a lot. It's been there since the beginning. The inception of film as a commercial product was based off of novelties. Nickelodeon projectors at arcades, shows at fairs, the Hales tours. It was all about how to wow the audience in a short amount of time. This kind of filmmaking and this time period in film's development is called the cinema of attractions, and it's about to become super popular. You actually might be familiar with these kinds of films. The work of Georges Méliès is some of the most influential in this early part of film, and it super contributed to these punchy, short little film spectacles. He often used physical bodies as the attraction. So Méliès drops some hot, sexy magic tricks and hand-colored film reels, and the industry starts to form. Bam, it's the 20th century and everyone thinks the cinema of attractions is sick as hell. Let's do the thing we always do and milk it dry. These shorts for fairs and arcades were often of dancers or magicians doing tricks, sometimes of traveling trains and cars, some of circuses, and I apologize for the wording here, some of freak shows. The very nature of freak shows were exploitative to their performers, but they were also really popular at the time that novelty films were on the rise, and with the members of these freak shows being all about the spectacle of their bodies, they were suited for novelty films. Both were marketed as gimmicks and things to marvel at, one for the technology and one for the non-conformity. This kind of spectatorship of disabled bodies was around for a while, and the two things that made these shows so popular is one, the horror aspect, and two, the fascination or pity that people had with disabled bodies. When people would go to these freak shows, there would be often some kind of entitlement. Yes, it was technically a show that they paid for, but a lot of spectators would take it as an invitation to compare themselves in their abled, conformitist bodies to those of people who are different. There were these two knee-jerk reactions, and they would either be horror or pity. Because these people were literally on display in a way that able people weren't. People thought of life as a disabled person to be just impossible. It was impossible to imagine these people could be happy or independent or any other positive thing because, well, they're not like me, and that's so sad. That's just so sad that they can never feel my happiness. And while disabled people were and still are mistreated, our lives are not defined by misery. We can and do feel all the same positive emotions that able people do. But this power dynamic between the spectator and the spectacle, it became the default that disability was sad or scary. The two genders. I want to acknowledge that it wasn't just disabled peoples in these freak shows. They would often take people of color and tout them as undiscovered species, and it was super messed up and racist. I got nothing else to say. It was just bad. Freak shows and how they impacted entertainment, as well as the general populace's view on non-conforming bodies, was massive. It's a really big topic that deserves its own video, so in the interest of keeping this streamlined, I'm just gonna stick to film. I'm sorry. That horror aspect took hold pretty quickly, in my opinion, due to a combination of 1910's Frankenstein and the 1932 film Freaks. Frankenstein used prosthetics and costuming to make an able actor look deformed and employed some mannerisms of choice. Freaks was also marketed highly as a horror film, and while it wasn't demonizing to the disabled people cast in the roles, they were also the main source of horror. It took a while for this sympathetic angle to kick in, while the presence of disability in horror was loud and proud and super harmful. This is another big topic that I don't have time for. I'm sorry. Note to self, stop bringing up other topics in your videos. Flash forward a handful of decades, and though we have not grown past the idea of disabled people as scary, and still haven't, we have started a new genre. Yes, it is spring of 1989. Margaret Thatcher is utilizing her girl boss powers to exploit poor people, and Rain Man just swept the Academy Awards. It had 8 nominations and 4 wins, including Best Picture and Best Actor. It is the dawning of a new era, one that I like to call You've probably run into this stuff before, even if you didn't really notice it. Videos of disabled people doing ordinary things and deeming it remarkable for no other reason than the fact that they are disabled. We see videos of athletes with prosthetics advertising for the Olympics, phrases like, "your excuse is invalid," over pictures of disabled kids, or "if they can do it, so can you." This is what we call inspiration porn. Man, my legs are numb. I gotta stretch. Maybe I shouldn't sit down for the entirety of a video, huh? Ugh, cross-legged. The term inspiration porn was coined in 2012 by Stella Young, an activist and writer.
And I use the term porn deliberately because they objectify one group of people for the benefit of another group of people.
Inspiration porn is a pretty loose genre of content defined as the portrayal of disabled people as inspirational solely or in part on the basis of their disability. It can come in a lot of forms, most notably inspirational Instagram posts showing disabled people doing ordinary things and going, "Wow, amazing. In film, it had a slow startup due to the aforementioned presumption of disabled bodies and mannerisms as horrible, until Rain Man came along and ruined everything. Take off my history hat. It is no longer history time. There were a few that did the woe is the disabled protagonist shtick leading up to this, but Rain Man was the one that ended up being really, really lucrative, really liked by critics, and most importantly, popular. It didn't incept the trend, but it got the ball rolling for more. Like war movies before it, films about disability were suddenly Oscar-winning vehicles for actors to show off. All these studios and writers saw Rain Man and were like, hey, we can do that too. And so they did. And these kinds of films started popping up more. Inspiration porn has this habit of presenting anything a disabled person does as remarkable. It exceptionalizes disability simply for existing with this underpinning of, if someone with a disability can do it, then you, an able person, can do it too. It turns disabled people into symbols of inspiration rather than people who are just living, chilling, vibing, perhaps. Inspiration porn is reducing disability to something that is so apparently tragic that the act of existing is somehow an achievement. That living as a disabled person must be so terrible that doing a mundane thing is suddenly the happiest moment of their life. And this goes back to how disabled people were displayed in freak shows and novelty films, as an impossible way of living, as something unimaginable and thus deserving of an able-bodied person's pity. And when a disabled person does something, it's motivational. Inspiration porn defines disability as misery, so every banal thing a disabled person does suddenly becomes a victory despite the fact that it's this person's life. Watching an amputee walk is no more remarkable than watching an able person walk, and the act of extraordifying disability turns us into walking flesh bags of sad. I got a secret for you. Yeah, it's a secret. You gotta come a little closer. Come on. I'm literally catcalling you. Come on. You ready? Disability isn't a bad thing. Stella Young talks about this in her TED Talk, saying that we have been sold a lie about disability and its exceptionalism. She cites this as the greatest injustice of ableism.
I'm here to tell you that we have been lied to about disability. Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing.
So this idea of inspiration porn is degrading. It's exploitative of disabled people, positioning them as objects of inspiration rather than people just to get you to, I don't know, run a marathon or play basketball or kill your dad. I don't know what athletes do. Could you tell? Was it the glitter that gave me away? It's infantilizing, and I don't like it, because we are not here to be your inspiration, or your motivation, or anything else. Because no, the life of a disabled person is not tragic, and yes, you have been sold a lie about its exceptionality, and it devalues the actual achievements made by disabled people. These kinds of films have two categories for disabled people, either one-dimensional saints that are symbols instead of people who must overcome their disability, or burdens to those around them who must be endured like a trial. One of them dehumanizes, one of them centralizes the struggles of the able people in the story. And it begs the question of, like, when can we be just people? Why do we always have to symbolize something greater? Again, it's back to this idea of exceptionalism. A disabled person has as much capacity as anyone else to be an asshole. I'm an asshole. Why do you think I'm making this video? I can be your angel or I could be your devil. Thanks, Hollywood. Rain Man popularized this on the screen, and several other films with similar tones started popping up. 1990, Daniel Day-Lewis won for playing Christy Brown in My Left Foot. 1990 also had Oscar nominee Tom Cruise as a paraplegic war veteran in Born on the 4th of July. Robin Williams got a Best Actor nod for The Fisher King. Wow, what's this? An able man playing a disabled role and getting praised for it? Best Supporting Actor nod for Leonardo DiCaprio in What's Eating Gilbert Grapes for his role as a mentally disabled child. But of course, none of these were the real solidifiers of this subgenre. No, it wasn't My Left Foot or The Fisher King. The real nail in the coffin was...
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
I know we don't want to do this, but if we're going to talk about disability in film, then we've got to talk about this film because it was massive. Forrest Gump was nominated for 75 awards and it won 50 of them. At the Oscars alone, it won 6 awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Tom Hanks in yet another role with a disabled character played by an able actor. Hanks is superb. Tom Hanks may be the only actor who could have played the role. In a part Dustin Hoffman might have once killed for, Hanks plays a kind, semi-imbecile whose very blankness makes him an ideal audience prism through which many of the key events of the 50s through early 80s can be viewed. If Forrest is a holy fool, Mr. Hanks makes his holiness very apparent. Forrest Gump changed film in a lot of ways. It turned this slowly building subgenre of disability dramas as vehicles for actors flexing into its own industry. It shows up on hundreds upon hundreds of best movie lists, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people, and none of those are wrong. It has a massive slice of the history timeline for film, and I'm not trying to take anything away from you or your friends or anyone else. The influences this single film has had on the industry and culture in the West as a whole were the size of like 2.5 Texases. 2! That's a lot. I don't know how big Texas is. The meticulous tracking of natural light for shooting was amazing. The effects used to insert Forrest into parts of history look great and holds up to this day because of how much care went into its creation. Forrest Gump was a movie well loved by the people making it, and you can feel that passion in how effortlessly the film itself plays out, despite how tedious the creation of it was. And I know for a fact that it has had an impact on multiple generations of filmmakers just by virtue of being a film student myself and hearing my peers and professors talk about it. The influence is still felt to this day, and it has been Tom Hanks' career-defining performance. But why? Why this movie? What's special about it compared to Hanks' other Oscar-winning performance in Philadelphia? Could it be the winding narrative of the film itself, or the story of America as it loses its innocence? Perhaps it was the technical feats, the CGI making the impossible possible. Maybe the charm and whimsy just touched people's hearts that much. But that's not it. You know that's not it, and I know that's not it. Be honest, when you watch Forrest Gump, what do you remember? It wasn't the precision in the filmmaking or marveling at dead presidents as they spoke to our protagonist, it was Tom Hanks. You remember his performance as Forrest, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie, it's perfectly fine, though I have my personal grievances with it as a disabled person. You can like this movie. You can like all the movies I've mentioned. That is not the point of any of this. I just want people to understand that there is a level of exploitation happening in these kinds of films, and I want to understand how we got here, what facilitated this, and the reasoning behind people being so damn fascinated with disability as inspiration and drama. Why is there such a fascination with disability as, like, a magic trick? Acting at its core is about being what you're not. And that, to me, is why people have such an obsession with inspiration porn and disability as played by an able person. Going all the way back to freak shows through the motivational posts and films, we are drilled with this idea of disability as being an impossible reality. This kind of content invites the viewer to look at it and go, if they can do it, so can I, and by extension saying, I'm glad that's not me. Disability is an impossibility to many audiences, which is why they want to see it performed. It is way more palatable to watch someone act rather than be. There is something comforting in the knowledge that it's all an act. That at the end of the day, that actor can get up out of the wheelchair and walk across the stage and collect their award. They can speak without a stutter and hear people without needing signs or captions. These films aren't any genuine representation of individuals who are disabled so much as they are a vehicle for actors who want to perform the impossible being disability. Angelo Murata, sorry if I got your name wrong, a writer and critic, has talked about disability a lot as a disabled creator, and this is one quote from him that has really stuck with me. I think disabled people are used to seeing these sort of able-bodied disabled narratives that are about disability as this kind of tragic condition that keeps you from living a real life that you have to get past. That trend is a dangerous misrepresentation of what it's like to live with a disability. You don't turn off your disability, you don't simply cure your disability or transcend your disability. It's something that you live with every day. And it's hard to watch someone put on and take off disability like it's a costume and get endless praise for it. Knowing that the people on the screen have never known aspects of living disabled life does make it feel cheap and disingenuous. To me, at least. And it does become easier to swallow when you see an able actor playing a disabled character because you know in your head that it's all an act. And because of the prospect of not being of able body or mind is so sad or impossible or unimaginable or scary to so many people that it can only be an able actor to play these parts.
He doesn't know what I lack or how I am incomplete.
At the end of the day, they aren't playing a character so much as they are playing a disability as a character, taking mimetic tics and behaviors and turning that into the focal point of their acting. It's caricaturing. And the reason this is kind of not great is because it's taking away roles from disabled actors who not only are disabled, but will have an inherently more nuanced performance because they're playing a character rather than playing a disability. And if you think for whatever reason a disabled person can't act in a movie, my dude, my guy, buddy, friend, that is kind of ableist of you. There's nothing about an able person that makes them more qualified to act than a disabled person. Stretch my legs out, doing fucking stretch. Oh shit, like, showing my ass here. Other than an industry that vastly favors them and a lack of roles. Don't believe me? Watch, I can prove it with math. A gay person doing math? What? I didn't take the label off this like I said I would. It's not sponsored. 20% of the population is disabled. That is 1 in 5 people. There are millions of roles in film and television. Only 2% of them are disabled characters, and of that already tiny 2% chance, only 5% of them are played by a disabled actor. That is a depressingly small number. Able actors have cornered the market, which brings us to the word of the day, disabled mimicry. Okay, friends, what we're not going to do is compare this to blackface. What we're not going to do is call this any blackface or drag-adjacent names like cripping up. Because not only is that just reckless, it's also reductive. Queer voices and people of color are equally as likely to be disabled. Their voices are going to be included, so we are using the term disabled mimicry. So what we're going to do is define disabled mimicry, explain the reasoning behind it, and what it means. I'm gonna explain it. You're gonna listen. But I appreciate the support. Disabled mimicry is a term used to describe the performance of disability by able people, most commonly on screen, in film, and television. The reason we aren't going to compare this to, say, a cis actor playing a trans character is because, 1, this group overlaps and there can be disability in any other minority, and 2, because there's a difference between these two things and the distinction is important. So watching an actor perform disability gets widespread acclaim, and in these roles they are not really characters, but caricatures, as well as taking away roles for disabled actors. What of the narratives? Speedrun time! Take a shot every time I say disabled. Disabled people are 1. Sad little things that are just so pitiful because disability is sad and you should feel sad. 2. Perfect little angels that are the very embodiment of innocence who we must protect from the cruel, cruel world. And 3. The heavy burden slung onto the backs of caregivers, families, and friends. What do they all have in common? They hate being disabled. God, they just hate it so much. All they want to do is not be disabled anymore, that's all. I myself will see an able person walking down the street and be like, God, I wish that was me. Every day, all the time. Sorry. Just kidding, I don't leave my house. Disability is usually seen as an obstacle to overcome in these films. It's the inciting incident. Their disability, according to the narrative, is what's holding them back from being happy or fulfilled in life. It's going back to the idea of the only disability is a bad attitude, but of course that's not true.
The reason that that's bullshit is because it's just not true. Because of the social model of disability, you know, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a rap. Never. You know, smiling at a television screen isn't going to make closed captions appear for people who are deaf. You know, no amount of standing in the middle of a bookshop and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille.
You don't cure disability, you don't overcome it, you live with it. And that's it. So this narrative of needing to overcome is pretty disingenuous because coping with your disability is not point A to point B, it's just your whole life. There is no getting better, and you know what? Disabled people don't need to get better. Just because your conforming body and mind make you happy does not mean they will make other people happy. It's this kind of white knight able complex that makes these films believe we must be saved from our disability when in reality, that isn't really the problem. The problem is accessibility. And disability certainly isn't easy. It can be frustrating and hard, which is what makes seeing these mimic-based portrayals all the more off, because they can't and don't know what it's like to be disabled. Acting is pretending to be so when you are not, yes. However, when an act is so hyper-involved with the disability aspect of their character, that's all they are at the end of the day.
Here, thankfully, right, I think it matters, at least from my perspective, and I had the same experience that you did in Googling it early on. I think it matters that it's an actor who also has a disability and has cerebral palsy, insofar as that's not sort of an extra thing that he has to put on. He's able to sort of be in the performance as a character.
There's this one quote from Daniel Day-Lewis that always makes me kind of sad. I felt I had an understanding, to some extent, his anger, his frustrations, his desire to create, and his sense of impatience. Many different aspects of his life I felt I had an understanding of, and they didn't relate specifically in my mind to his disability at all. None of this really comes from a place of malice or intending to infantilize or dehumanize people with disabilities. This quote just makes me sad because I feel like Daniel Day-Lewis is being genuine and wants to give the person he's portraying more depth outside of being disabled, but you can't divorce one from the other. It's hard to articulate. We are not just our disabilities, but we also cannot be separated from them because it colors most of the life lived. That's why there's such a push against person-first identification. And this is because people want the achievements of disabled people to exist in spite of their disability, and thus it can be celebrated. And this applies to everything from being able to get out of bed in the morning and being able to walk down the street. In these kinds of narratives, these are the events that happen in spite of disability and not as an extended experience of them. They want to see it overcome because to a lot of able people, that's the route to being happy or fulfilled. Now, I do understand in the case of disabled mimicry, there can be cases wherein it is showing some kind of deterioration of someone's body. There are cases wherein an able actor may be needed so that, for example, a chair user wouldn't get themselves hurt trying to perform as an able actor. But this theme of disability as a hurdle to overcome almost always comes back. The theory of everything is a good example that I like to point to because, yes, it does require someone who is able to walk and speak without assistance because it's about the deterioration of the subject's body. And at the very end of the movie, at the very last scene, we have Stephen Hawking giving a lecture as he accepts an award. And in this scene, at the end of the film, at the height of his career, as someone who has changed the field of physics and published monumentally important works, what happens? He imagines that he can walk. He imagines that he is able to get up out of his chair and walk over to a student who has dropped her pen, and this is very telling to me, because I don't think any disabled person at the height of their fucking career, after becoming a household name because of their research, would think, damn, I wish I wasn't disabled. So why was that the focus? And why did this take precedent over all of his other achievements so much that it was put at the very end of the film? Because disabled people in film aren't really people. They're symbols. They're tragedies or warning or cautionary tales. They're innocence incarnate or the hardship that someone else has to endure. And we're back. Got a little heavy there, huh? So near the beginning of this video, I said that the news that a non-autistic actor playing an autistic character didn't really surprise me, and that the outrage towards it did surprise me. And that's because of the past half hour of explaining I just did. Because for decades, that was the norm. And not only was it the norm, it received awards. An able actor playing a disabled role has been praised time and time again. When Music's trailer dropped, the internet exploded and people were pretty pissed off. So what changed in the last few years? I mean, in 2017, The Shape of Water had a speaking actress play a mute character. She got nominated for Best Actress, and there was minimal criticism of that. In 2019, Shazam had a character with crutches, and it was met with a lot of praise. For the record, I do think this is one of the best disabled characters we've gotten because the film neither ignores its disability nor centers its character and personality around it, despite the fact that it's still disabled mimicry.
Because everything I do is like some desperate attempt to get people to notice me, to not feel sorry for me. I mean, look at me. You even see me? Because most people don't. Because they don't want to. And now you don't either.
Disabled communities have been getting louder, and after so long of being dehumanized on screen and the performance of disability giving actors awards, I think people are starting to listen. There is a silver lining to this, and it's that we are starting to move away from the mimicry and the inspiration porn. We've even gotten a few films starring disabled actors. The Peanut Butter Falcon and The Witch Hunters are two that I personally really enjoyed. Music was made in response to a trend that was already starting to die off, and that's a good thing. I'm glad it's dying. Let us parade the casket through the streets, Prince Philip style. Are the royalists gonna come for me? Fuck the monarchy, I don't care. Have fun in hell, Philip. Of the more recent examples of disabled mimicry, though still frustrating by virtue of being mimicry, they're getting better. Disabled characters are getting to be less symbolic and more actual characters, but it's very slow since this idea of disability as something out of a freak show or accompanied with sad music or an uplifting quote, "Oh, the smallest violence, someone get it for me for this poor person who is disabled." It's just so drilled into audiences that this transition is gonna take a while. Part of Music's failure was that it also wasn't a good movie. Unlike a lot of the other examples I used, which on the whole are well made and well written, the droves of people getting mad about this does give me some hope because it means that people will start listening. And you might be thinking, Gracie, who cares? Gracie, why are you spending so much time on this? Gracie, you made a joke about killing your dad earlier. Are you okay? And the answer is, I care. And evidently, a lot of other people do care. Otherwise, Sia wouldn't have deleted her Twitter account. There's a very good chance that this is just a small isolated incident because of the nature of Sia as a musician and not a filmmaker, or the fact that she cited Autism Speaks, the hate group, as a collaborator. We will probably keep seeing disability as this acting gimmick in the future, and inspiration porn has certainly not finished its tirade on social media. At the beginning, I asked why did Sia think this would do well, and why did she continue when everyone said to stop? And the answer is because historically, these kinds of films do go over well. They do bring in money and awards and accolades. It happened because it has been happening. This was just the first film that people actually were loud about. And I can only hope that people will keep getting loud. And if not, well, Hollywood is shitty. At least we always have cider.